Okay, good. Don't have any injuries. I think we came out pretty clean on it. It looks like Frank's after his MRI at the groin looks like it's more of a mild one, and he should be able to return after a little rest that we have here. We'll give the guys a few days off and then reconvene here. Reconvene later in the week and for practice. So, anyways, with that, time's yours. You guys hear me?
Yep, we've got you, Coach. Let's go first to Seren Petro. Go ahead,
Seren. Coach, first of all, and I'll have a follow-up real quick. Just McCole Hardman, just an update on where that sits and how optimistic a couple of weeks from now you are.
Yeah, so I thought he might be able to go this past week. That's a hiccup on my end. I mean, he's trying. I mean, he's trying to get this thing right, and it's just a matter of time. So really, day to day. Although he feels better today than he did on Saturday, so we'll just see how it goes during practice.
And then just a follow up. I'm not asking you to critique the officials. I know how you don't want to do that, but just it is such a fast game. You had a tackle on Patrick Mahomes where Max Crosby sacked. He had a good grip on the helmet, right? And the helmet's supposed to be part of the face mask. My question would be, do you anticipate there being change next year to, reviewing at least those? If you can't review everything the way we've heard Bill Belichick say, that maybe that there'll be an umbrella of player safety or face mask type of things, are used, that there could be a change in that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, listen, I sit in on a lot of those meetings, so there's always change going to take place. I mean, sometimes it's smaller than other years. But I know they'll go back and look, the league will look at everything and competition committee will look at everything. So they do a pretty good job with all that stuff.
Let's go next to Aaron Ladd. Go ahead, Aaron.
Coach, appreciate the time here. I'm wondering, during this bye week when you're with the team and going through the game plan, are you game planning for multiple teams, or is it one opponent that you guys kind of zero in on? How do you approach that when you kind of are waiting to know?
Yeah, well, you try, you don't know exactly, but a couple of teams we've played, a couple of teams we haven't. So, we'll try to focus in on the ones we think that we have a chance to play most of all, but also cover all of them. And while we have time I'm saying as a coaching staff, and then we'll narrow that down for the players as we get them this week, before we actually know for next week. So, but we'll work on some things that we need work on.
Let's go next to Pete Sweeney. Go ahead, Pete.
Hey, Coach, similar question to Aaron. I know you've had the bye week a couple times now. In your experience, what's the best way to treat it when it comes to the amount of rest you want when you guys get back in the mix? Just an outlook of your week until Monday.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's the trick to it is the balance. And then how the players utilize their free time. So, and coaches for that matter. I mean, we've got to make sure that we keep on top of the scheme stuff too. So we'll see how all that works out. But yeah, that I tell you, that's a trick to it, is to try to keep the balance for the players, stay sharp, and coaches still can add a couple things into the guys into their mix. And then we go from there.
Hey, good morning from chilly Kansas City. Welcome to SportsBeat Live, our weekly conversation about the Kansas City Chiefs with the folks in the media who know them best and with you. Good morning to Darla and Bethany for joining us, and good morning to Jesse Newell, Herbie Teope, and Vahe Gregorian for being here. It's a great crew to discuss Chiefs with you, and send us your questions and comments, and we'll talk Chiefs with anybody who wants to talk Chiefs. Herbie, there's a little bit of news to start the day. An award that was handed out, an AFC monthly honor that did not go to Patrick Mahomes, but to one of his teammates. Who was the AFC Offensive Player of the Month?
Hey, Jerick McKinnon. You know, when you score 9 touchdowns over a 6-week span, you deserve an award. So, yeah, Jerick McKinnon is the AFC Offensive Player of the Month for December. He is the third Chiefs player to win that award. Patrick Mahomes won it in November, and punter Tommy Townsend won it for the month of September. But McKinnon's, the way he finished the season, my goodness, 8 receiving touchdowns, 1 rushing, 2 multiple touchdown games against the Broncos, as well as in weeks, well, both of them against the Broncos when you think about it, 2 touchdowns receiving. But, yeah, he deserved that award. First running back in the Super Bowl era since 1970 to score in 5 straight games with a receiving touchdown. So kudos to him.
Yeah, look, he's been a tremendous player. His production reminds me a little bit of Damian Williams. Remember how he used to heat up toward the end of the regular season and in the playoffs. McKinnon may be just a better overall player, and I expect him to be, maybe not the feature back, but certainly share feature back duties with Isaiah Pacheco in the postseason. And it also gets me wondering, what is the future of Clyde Edwards-Helaire on this team? And Jesse, why don't you take a stab at that? First round pick is kind of becoming fading into the background a bit. And when it comes to thinking about how the Chiefs are going to operate at that position going forward.
Yeah, I'm kind of pushed to the back. Obviously, Isaiah Pacheco has been their running back recently, and Jerick McKinnon has become the AFC Player of the Month thanks to not only his contributions, but obviously Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, making him and propping him up and amplifying the strengths that he does have, which he's really good in pass protection. He's really good running routes, and has been able to free himself thanks to guys like Travis Kelce setting screens for him. And then, obviously be in the right place at the right time when Patrick Mahomes turns his back and throws one of these to you in Denver too. So he's been in the right spot at the right time a few different instances this year. So, I mean, it's probably just a question for the offseason, guys. At this point, I hate to say it doesn't matter, but it's sort of a secondary thing for the Chiefs. Like if Clyde is with the team next year, that's fine, and they can utilize him in the passing game. And if he's fully healthy, they can play to his strengths as much as possible. But maybe he's a back that is in a rotation, and if he's not, then they're probably fine with that too, honestly. And they've got a lot of draft picks to go out there and potentially get another running back as well. So I don't mean to diminish what Clyde has done or potentially what he could do with the Chiefs. It's just, obviously they're at a point right now, 14-3, looking forward to the playoffs. Doesn't seem like he's going to be a part of this unless we hear differently from Andy Reid here coming up. But it's just probably just not a matter of huge concern right now, just because that running back position seems to be in good hands right now. And in the future, it probably will be in good hands whether they draft somebody or they keep around these pieces that have been successful this year.
To add to that, because he's on injured reserve, they're going to have to make that decision. If they have a view to have him back in time for the Super Bowl, they're going to have to activate him or designate him as return to practice next week, because you've got 3 weeks before the Super Bowl. If he's not designated to return with that 21-day window, then, that kind of seals his fate for the rest of the season. Got to remember, the Chiefs are going to enter the offseason with the option, the 5th-year option, which is going to have to happen at some point this offseason if they want to use that on him. If not, he'll play next year in the last year of his rookie contract. And in that backfield, you have 2 running backs playing on a 1-year contract, Ronald Jones and Jerick McKinnon. So there are some decisions to be made in that backfield during the offseason.
Well, the 5th-year option's off right now. I mean, I don't think that's even a consideration. Right now, to me, it's just bringing him back on his rookie deal, that last year of it. And I would think the Chiefs would probably do that. He's familiar with the system. They know him. He knows them. But this probably would be the last go round for Clyde. And even if that doesn't work out, I wouldn't be surprised. But again, for a team that's 14-3, about ready to have the bye in the playoffs and potentially win another Super Bowl, it's not a big matter at this moment. It'll be something for the offseason, and even then, it might not be something that hinges the offseason because the Chiefs can be so successful in so many other ways.
Yeah, I just make a little case that in a kind of odd way, nothing against Clyde, who I had a lot of belief in, but his injury kind of allowed them to develop these other dimensions in a way that they maybe wouldn't have if they kept kind of, I hate to say forcing Clyde, but if Clyde was entrenched, it was sort of by default and with hopes instead of by really seizing it. And you got to like the versatility and sheer force that they can come with both these guys as the most active backs. And don't forget, I mean, maybe we'll see more of it, maybe not too much more, but when you get little twists like Kadarius Toney lining up in the backfield now and things like that, there's plenty going on there that doesn't necessarily seem to require Clyde to be part of it.
Good points, all, and as Jesse said a couple of times, absolutely right. This is a story for beyond the playoffs. There is plenty to discuss going into next week for the Chiefs, but let's start about this week. Start talking about this weekend. The seeds 2 through 7 play each other, and in the NFC, that is Chargers Jaguars. That's the 4-5 game. Bengals Ravens, that's 3-6, and Bills Dolphins is the 2-7 game. The Chiefs will meet the following weekend, the lowest remaining seed or the worst remaining seed from the games this weekend. And the question we've been asking ourselves all week, and I know we're working on stories about this, is what do we think is the most favorable matchup for the Chiefs? Maybe that's not the right way of putting it. I would think any matchup that doesn't involve a regular starting quarterback would be the most favorable. You know, the Dolphins and the Ravens appear to be in that position, right? Well, we know the Dolphins for sure have named Skylar Thompson as the starter this weekend, and Baltimore certainly. I don't know what's going on with Lamar Jackson, but he hasn't played since early December. So. What the Jaguars Chargers game, of course, with Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert, two terrific young quarterbacks going at each other. Let's just assume for the sake of argument that the Bills and the Bengals win. So it comes down to Jaguars and Chargers. Jesse, what things should we consider here, and who might match up better? Who might the Chiefs match up better against between those two?
Yeah, so I think I just would start with the Vegas line, which kind of is a pretty good indication of how teams are playing right now. And the Chargers are 2.5-point favorite on the road against Jacksonville. So to me, that says that home field's about 1.5. The Vegas market, the really sharp people out there would tell you that at this moment, the Chargers are about 4 points better than what the Jacksonville Jaguars would be on a neutral field. So I think because of that, if you're a Chiefs fan, you would cheer for the Jaguars. I think most Chiefs fans would do that anyway, based off of how both of those teams played the Chiefs in the regular season, just because we've talked about this before. It sure seems like the Chargers just bring their A or A-plus game against the Chiefs every single time they play them. And the Chiefs need their A game to just win by 3 or 7. You know, we remember probably the biggest play of the season, Jalen Watson's pick 6 won the game at Arrowhead, and then the Chiefs had to rally back in the fourth quarter to beat the Chargers on a game-winning drive from Patrick Mahomes in that game in LA. So all those things go into it, but I would say, obviously, based just off the Vegas, the Chiefs would be a bigger favorite at home against Jacksonville than they would be against the Chargers. One thing I will caveat, I hear so much about the hard to beat a team 3 times in 1 year. The studies, as you might expect, actually indicate the opposite. It's about the same as anybody else. It's really not as or it's about the same. You know, if you beat a team twice in a year, it's probably because you're the better team. If you play them at home in the playoffs, I think the record is 12-5 in those games of those teams that play at home. So not really anything more to be worried about there other than the Chargers getting healthy at this time of year and potentially just flat out being better than the Jaguars. The question mark with the Jaguars is, you know, Doug Peterson, and he's been a coach that's won a Super Bowl. You fear him a little bit. And obviously Trevor Lawrence has played better as the season's gone on, but I would think most Chiefs fans would take that Jacksonville matchup out of those two teams just based off of what they've seen this season and how they saw the Chiefs perform against those two teams in the two matchups, or I guess the three matchups that they did have.
I'm with Jesse there, and I just add to this that, you know, the last 4 games between the Chiefs and Chargers have been decided by a total of 18 points. And at some point, you start thinking the Wheel of Fortune's going to go, you know, some other way. And wouldn't that be a twist after the Chiefs dominate the AFC West, sweep the AFC West, and then have this little asterisk on their resume? And it's why they play the games. But the Chiefs will fear no one, I don't think. But I would think that's the most uncomfortable prospect of the two.
Herbie, we always come to you for injury updates. We don't usually do it for another team, but the Chargers didn't come out of their Week 18 game unscathed, right? Because of starters played, even though the Chargers had their seed locked up. Brandon Staley left his starters in well into the second half. And what's the latest you're hearing on guys like Mike Williams and Bosa?
Yeah, you got to figure with Mike Williams, the back injury, that's a concern. Joey Bosa was hurt in that game as well. When you think of the Chargers, they're always snake bit. There's always some kind of injury that affects them. And the Chiefs, over these last couple seasons, have never faced a fully healthy Chargers team. And so, you figured they were going to go into the postseason healthy, and they're not now. So, Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, that formidable duo, that might not be intact. Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, that might not be intact. So we'll see what happens with them. But, yeah, Brandon Staley had some explaining to do why he kept them in the game last week. And you just throw your hands up in the air.
Well, his coaching has been questioned before with some usually game day decisions, right? Play calling, fourth down risks, that sort of thing. But look, maybe we'll see if it has an impact on the Chargers at Jacksonville. By the way, Daniel, Andrew, others are in agreement. Jacksonville would be the preferred opponent of the Chiefs this weekend. I think the Bills and the Bengals are in a walkover situation. I think they both win big on this. Let's see, Dolphins, Bills, noon Sunday, Ravens or Bengals Sunday at 7:15 p.m. So, by the way, and I just scribbled this down, if let's just say it plays out the way we think it will with the home team's winning, and we'll throw Jacksonville in there, but I don't think it'll matter if it's Jacksonville or LA. I think the Chiefs will end up playing the early game either next Saturday or next Sunday and not the evening game. And I say that because there's a Monday night playoff game right between the Cowboys and the Bucs. I think they almost have to put the winner of that game in a Sunday night position because it'll either be Tom Brady or the Cowboys. So that'll be the last game played the following weekend. And I think if it's Bills Bengals, that's a primetime type of game that would be on Saturday night. So that leaves the first window on Saturday, Sunday for the Chiefs' first playoff game. Just a guess on my part. Okay. A couple other things I want to get to here, but let's answer a couple questions first. Paul wants to know how Kadarius Toney will be used in the playoffs. More playing time for him. Jesse, wasn't he the subject of your film breakdown this week?
Yeah, he was. They actually ran a 14-yard gain that was a Tyreek Hill play from 2016 that Andy Reid ran when he was in the backfield. So I think that's sort of the answer there. He's kind of the Chiefs' very cheap, very inexperienced answer to like gadget play Tyreek Hill sort of guy. And we talked about this on the the post game show last week as well, but he only had 16 snaps, but yet he's a guy that got 3 carries and 2 catches. So it feels like when he's on the field, the Chiefs are going to utilize him. Sam McDowell shared with me a stat. I think he gets utilized on around 30% of his plays that he's in. It was a top 10 mark in the NFL in terms of getting usage. So it feels like he is sort of, for lack of a better term, he's a gadget player for the Chiefs. He came in late. He probably doesn't have the full grasp of the entire offense, but week by week by week, they just give him a little bit more where he lines up in certain personnel with certain positions and certain motions, and they're able to use his skill set in the way that they were against the Raiders last week. So it also depends how healthy they get. I think the Chiefs would feel more comfortable if McCole Hardman is healthy to put him out there on a down-by-down basis. He's been with the team a long time. He's been productive in that way, but I definitely think part of what makes them dangerous is they can throw Kadarius Toney out there in certain packages, certain looks, and he's able to use that horizontal skill set, that ability to make guys miss in very short spaces to the Chiefs' benefit. So I think he'll continue to be used in the way. And I guess to wrap all this up, I actually asked Kadarius Toney in the locker room in Vegas. I said, what can Chiefs fans expect from you in the playoffs? And he said, kind of laughed, and he said, basically something like today. So that's probably your easiest answer.
I'd just throw this in real quick, Blair. I'd venture to say that even now with, getting 18 snaps, who is the more exhilarating player to watch after Mahomes and Kelsey besides him? I mean, he's really got something. I mean, I think I still can't figure out how the Chiefs got him for what they did.
No, their use of him is their use of Toney is pretty fascinating. He's only top 20 snaps in the game in the Chiefs uniform just once, going back way to week 10. But ever since, it's like it's in the high teens. But they're getting the most out of him. If there's a player who's getting the most out of his offensive snaps, it's definitely Kadarius Toney. And of course, we know they love him as their primary punt returner. In the past, we're always holding our breath when someone gets their, when the punt is in the air. With him, you don't have that issue. You just hold your breath, seeing what kind of electrifying move he's going to make with that first step.
Jesse, when you asked Toney in the locker room what to expect from him in the playoffs, it would have been kind of funny if he had just gone into his Mr. T and said, pain. Did not happen, however.
By the way, did you guys know he goes by Joka? That he's got apparently he does some rap stuff, and I just looked this up because Travis Kelce on his podcast earlier in this week referred to him as Joka. I thought maybe it was some play off of Batman, but anyway, more for us to explore in the coming weeks.
Well, you're who I go to for rap references, Vahe, and you me.
As well you should, and of course I do turn to you for that, Blair.
That's right.
I thought his specialty was IT stuff. That's crazy. Well, it must be rap. Okay.
Look, I got a lot going on here at the Nerve Center, okay? By the way, just a quick aside that you should know, I think we're getting our house jacked, so if I go flying up out of my seat, you'll know what happened.
Okay, good to know. Well, we may stay on a little extra in anticipation of that possibility. Very good. Very good. Hey, all right. So I got a question for not only you all, but for those listening to us and watching us, because it's a week off for the Chiefs. And so we're looking for stories to write that are, playoff centric and just maybe general too. And one thing that we're working on is it's 10 years of Andy Reid in Kansas City. He's got 1 to 3 games left to complete his 10th year here. But even with that time remaining, I didn't think it was too far-fetched to come up with an all Andy Reid team for the Chiefs. So the best players to play for Andy Reid in the 10 years he's been in Kansas City. I won't ask you guys about that, but one thing I am kind of curious about is if you, I'm doing the team. In fact, I even picked some honorable mentions at each position. But how about just a kind of a off the top of your head, a quick top 5 of the best players to play for the Chiefs in the last decade. So starting in 2013. Now, listen, you can have a player who had a great career that was toward the end of his career in 2013 and 2014. I guess I'm just looking at, playing for the Chiefs over the last 10 years, who would be the top 5 Andy Reid players. So don't have to list them all at once, but just let's start with some names. Patrick Mahomes, of course, would be number 1, and Michael has already weighed in his 5. Mahomes, Kelsey, Jamal Charles, Derek Johnson, Eric Berry. That is a great list. That is terrific. Look at Herbie. Michael apparently comparing notes with Herbie. Vahe, what do you got up there?
You can't read my writing, but it's exactly what Michael wrote.
Wow.
With Mahomes, Kelsey, DJ. Oh, and Chris Jones is one of the 6 to fit into the 5.
There you go.
It's a shame, like when I think of that list right there, because I actually wrote the same list down, and it's a crying shame Andy Reid didn't get Jamal Charles in his prime or even DJ in his prime, because he got him towards the tail end of their career. And I loved how Andy Reid was able to work in Jamal Charles' skill set as a receiver. Who's ever going to forget that 5-touchdown game against the Raiders? I mean, that was just phenomenal. And so that is a fantastic list there, Michael, because that's exactly what I wrote down.
that Herbie, that game, that was unbelievable. I mean, that was, and was that 13 or 14? It was pretty early.
It was 13. It was it was in 13, and 4 of those touchdowns. Go ahead.
4 of them screens.
Yep.
I mean, and they were different kinds of screens, right? They were all, schemed up a little differently. I kind of remember him getting a little bit of a beer shower in one of the Oakland end zones too.
Yep.
Andrew has.
And I agree with Andrew. Tyron deserves a place in this discussion. Absolutely.
But it's kind of hard. Like for me, I thought about Tyron and Eric Berry when I think of who meant the most to like fans and like his impact here. And then we think of Eric Berry's return from cancer. We were all at that game when he came through the tunnel, and it was just so electric. Tyrann Mathieu obviously helped them win a Super Bowl, but I think like who meant the most to this community, I would say it's Eric Berry.
I agree with that point, Herbie, but I would just say that I think Tyrann Mathieu, I don't want to say they wouldn't have won a Super Bowl without him, but I do want to say he was pretty instrumental in the entire reset of that defense. And you could see how it might have played out differently without him. Just a thought.
Dan has Alex Smith, and of course, Alex Smith wouldn't be the quarterback on this team, but you could certainly make a case one of the top 10 most important players and best players in the Andy Reid era, 3-time Pro Bowler. Mahomes has been a Pro Bowler every year, but Alex Smith in his 5 years as a starter made the Pro Bowl 3 times and led the NFL in passer rating in his final year. So, hey, and Paul, you make a terrific point, and he is on my top 10. Mitchell Schwartz was so good and for so long with the Chiefs that I couldn't find another right tackle who would be a second best. For almost every other position that I have, I have a second, third, even a fourth best, but for right tackle, I couldn't find anybody. That's how good Mitchell Schwartz was for such a long time. Jesse, we haven't heard from you, so you have to weigh in.
That's because you guys got all the right answers. I was trying to real quickly just scroll through like Pro Football References top players and see if there's any Chiefs that we missed out on. And the one you guys even mentioned that kind of showed up through multiple teams was Alex Smith. So perhaps a little bit underrated with what he did, just because we know that Mahomes has taken this to another level, and Alex would be the first one to tell you that too. But I did think Mitchell Schwartz, so I'm glad you brought that one up, Blair. And obviously just I think the first 5 seem to me to be those 5, and then the rest, we can have some honorable mentions, and we talked about the Chris Jones fitting the 6th one in there. Tyrann Mathieu, changing the attitude of the defense, I think, is a good way to put it, because the Chiefs did not have much swag level coming in before that, and it sure seemed like Tyrann added to that sort of thing, helped them win a Super Bowl. So I think we're all on the right track here. I'm not seeing anybody. I was kind of flipping through guys that were still around in 2013, and any guys that potentially would be on this list were no longer with the Chiefs at that time. So I think we got it covered. I think this list is good, and I think good for us, which is exactly what we want. Michael hit it right off the bat, so we didn't have to use our brains to even think of anything else.
And I never do. So that was especially helpful to me. One player that has not been mentioned is the Chiefs single season sack leader, who had several good years in a Chiefs uniform before he departed, Justin Houston. So, but that was the changing of the guard defensively, right? That was, Bob Sutton left. That was the final year for Eric Berry, for Justin Houston, for D Ford, others. And in comes Tyrann Mathieu and other players on the defensive side. So Andrew has Daniel Sorensen named here. I would suggest, Andrew, that when you see or read the all Andy Reid team that I picked, do not be surprised to see Daniel Sorensen's name on there in some fashion.
Especially if you're going by. Go ahead, Vi.
No, I'll just throw this out there. Do they win the Texans playoff game without Daniel Sorensen's 2 plays? I don't think they do. And then they don't win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, especially if you go by position, because Sorensen, even though he was a backup safety, he was able to give them whenever Barry or Marcus Cooper or anybody else back in those days were hurt, you were able to slide in Sorensen. So he was valuable as a backup, and especially, as Vahe mentioned, on special teams. We just have to forget the fact that his final year here, Tyrann Mathieu throwing his hands up in the air every time he was beat. But that was towards the tail end of his prime. So I'll give him some slack there.
Okay, great conversation, guys, and good way for me to tease a story. A lot of good stories coming up in the next week from the Star, from these guys, and on kansascity.com. Please stay tuned. In fact, Vahe, what do you got coming up, Chiefs-wise?
Well, it's funny. Thanks for taking me to that, Blair. First, I think that our friends from Big Charlie Saloon in Philadelphia are regular watchers of this, either on game day or today. And I spoke with them yesterday for a piece I'm doing on the fantasy prospect of the 2 number 1 seeds meeting in the Super Bowl. So, yo, Paulie, just shout out to you guys at Big Charlie's. And I'm looking forward to trying to put that together with some of the people I talked to, finish that off today.
Jesse, what you got coming?
Yeah, we'll tease this, but everybody's looking for an edge in the NFL. People pay millions of dollars for an edge, and the Chiefs have been 3 times as productive as any other team in one particular way that they use their offense. And so investigating that, looking into that on Monday. A lot of it involves Travis Kelce, but the biggest part is Andy Reid and what he does with his play design. So the Chiefs, I was looking up the WAR. They have a football war out there. The WAR on this particular play was almost 2. So it's almost like the Chiefs are gaining a 2-win advantage by doing this thing that almost nobody in the NFL else is doing. So that's part of the reason you win football games when you have Andy Reid as your coach. So you can investigate that. That should be up Monday on the Kansas City Star website. But the secret edge the Chiefs have found out that the NFL still needs to catch up on.
Hey, Herbie, bring it home. What you got coming?
Hey, we're in award season, so essentially I'm just on standby whenever these publications announce all their all-pro teams, etc. Player of the month, player of the week, that's essentially it. And then next week, obviously, we are back on the ground running as the Chiefs prepare for the AFC divisional round.
Yeah, Herbie's all over it every day, every hour of every day, actually, bringing the news. So, and let me echo a thought from Vahe. Yes, we've got some viewers in Philly. We also have them in Nashville and LA. As I was reminded this week, it's always great to hear from those folks and from you. So that'll do it for today. And I think a little programming note. I think we're going to be with you a couple of times next week in anticipation of Chiefs playoff game, maybe as early as Monday, but we need to huddle with our production team and these fellows here to make sure that can happen. Definitely Thursday next week as we preview the Chiefs versus the fill in the blank game that'll be played on fill in the blank date. So for Herbie, Jesse, Vahe, for Sam McDowell, who couldn't be with us today, and for George Howard, our producer, thanks for watching, and we'll do it again soon.